Welcome back, everybody. I'm Rod Meldrum, and I'm excited about this week's podcast. We're going to do it. We have actually changed our venue here a little bit, and we are actually put this studio together here at my residence. So it's make it a little bit easier. So just for those of you who are just joining us, this is the Come Follow Me program, and what we're doing this week here is actually lesson number 19, which is right here. Let me grab that real quick here. So we're going to be talking about Doctrine and Covenants sections 46, 47, and 48. And there's a couple of things that we want to just make everybody know. We want you to know that you should go ahead and go through the lesson and go through it with your gospel doctrine class or your ward, whatever. These podcasts are to go into certain aspects of the lesson in more depth and detail. And today, I am really excited about sharing with you some information that has to do with gifts and also with learning and knowledge and things like that. So we're going to go ahead and get going with that. And I want to start off. If you have your scriptures handy there, go ahead and turn to section 46 in the Doctrine and Covenants there, and verse 8, where I'm going to start off with some things here involving gifts. And this is what it says. It says, "Wherefore beware lest ye are deceived, and that ye may not be deceived. Seek ye earnestly the best gifts, always remembering for what they are given." Now, I'm reminded about it was a couple of years ago, actually. It's September in BYU, Idaho, and Elder Bednar was given a devotional up there at BYU, Idaho, at the Ice Center there. And in that, it's kind of funny because there's like 11 or 10 or 11,000 students there, and they wanted to instead of getting up and giving a presentation or a speech or whatever or a talk, he instead said, "You know what? Here is a number, and if you have any burning questions that you want to have answered, you can just text me." So immediately he has like 10,000 texts on there. So I don't know. And it just kind of chose randomly different questions. But one of the questions that came up was to do with this idea of gifts. And I wanted to just kind of share with you some things that I learned from Elder Bednar in his talk. One of the first things that I think the question that he got was something along the lines of, there's all these different kinds of gifts, and how do we go about getting these gifts? How do we go about making sure that we have like a checklist of all these gifts and so forth? How do we go about making sure that we have each one of these gifts before we die or during our lifetimes and so forth? And Elder Bednar kind of stood there for a second, and he kind of says, you can't earn these. These are not something you can do. It's not because of your own desire to have them, and then you want them, and so you're going to be given these gifts. He says they're gifts. You can't earn a gift. A gift is freely given, and God gives the gifts for specific reasons. And so he says it's not like where you have a list and you check it off. Okay, now I have this gift, and now I have that gift, and I have this gift. He really basically said that it's the gifts are from God, and you have to qualify to be able to receive certain gifts by your obedience, things like that. We're going to get into that in just a second. But the gifts themselves are not for you. It's not for you to get the gift. It's for you to have the gift when you need it to bless the lives of other people, which is what it's all about. So in this verse it says, "Seek ye earnestly the best gifts, always remembering for what they are given." So why are they given? Verse 9 says, "For verily I say unto you, that they are given for the benefit of those who love me and keep all my commandments." It's not for you, it's for other people. And it says, "And him that seeketh to do, that all may be benefited, that seek or that ask of me, that ask and not for a sign, but they may consume it upon their lust." So that, in other words, you're not supposed to get the gifts so that you can show other people how wonderful you are, kind of thing. The gifts are to be used specifically for the purposes that the Lord has in mind for you, and also for the person who needs to receive the gift. Verse 10 says, "And again, verily I say unto you, I would that ye should always remember that, and always retain in your minds that those gifts are, or what those gifts are that are given unto the church." So members of the church can have these gifts, and there are specific gifts, and they're going to go through them here in just a minute. "For all have not every gift given unto them, but there are many gifts, and to every man is given a gift by the Spirit of God. To some is given one, and to some is given another, that all may be profited thereby." In other words, the goal in our life shouldn't be, okay, I want to make sure I have each one of these gifts. Okay, that's not the goal. Some people will be, they will fulfill the measure of their creation with God if they just have one gift and they use it properly and well. So other people are going to need to have more gifts. And so I think this is what he's saying here, is that the purpose of the gifts is so that everybody else can benefit. So you are to have the gifts so that you can bless the lives of other people. And then he says, and then it goes into kind of a quick list of some of the gifts that are available. One is to know that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. This is verse 13. And that he was crucified for our sins. Verse 14. To others is given to believe on their words. So, the gift of believing, or having a believing spirit. That they also might have eternal life if they continue faithful. Verse 15. And again, to some it is given by the Holy Ghost to know the differences of administration. And there's lots of things that could be talked about with that, but we're not going to get into that here today. Verse 16. And again, it is given by the Holy Ghost to some to know the diversities of operations, whether they be of God, that the manifestations of the Spirit may be given to every man to profit withal. So in other words, to be able to discern, essentially, I think is what they're talking about here, the spirit of discernment, and be able to understand if something is from God or if not from God, or if it's from Satan, or where it's from, if it's from man. And again, verily I say unto you, to some is given by the Spirit of God the word of wisdom. Now we know that we have the word of wisdom, which is about food and drink and some of those kind of things, kind of a health code. But it's interesting because he talks about two different things here, and this is one of the things I want to get into. So verse 18 says, to another is given the word of knowledge. So one of them is a word of wisdom, the other one is a word of knowledge. Now, many of you know, for many years I was the senior scientific researcher for the Universal Model Project, and Dean Sessions and I had many discussions and things. And one of the discussions that came up clear back in 2002 was, how do we learn? What is the process by which we actually can learn? And I wanted to share with you some of my notes. I actually went back and found some of my notes here from 2002, talking about how do we learn? What is learning? And then this is some of the notes here. I'm going to kind of hold this up here, but you can kind of see some of the notes there a little bit there. And then that led to this one, which is the learning process, and it's over the course of time. And so let me kind of just go through a very quick thing. This is really profound information, and brothers and sisters, the information that we gleaned from this about a 2 or 3 day long discussion and pondering and trying to invite the Spirit to kind of help us understand how these things work. And it can come down to really very simple. How do we learn? How do we input things into our brains, into our minds? How do we do that? There's only really a couple of ways that we can do that. I mean, we have our 5 senses, our physical senses of touch and taste and smell and sight, and our hearing. And so those are our 5 general senses. That's how we can input stuff into our brains. But we also have our intelligence. We have our mind, right? Our ability to reason and to think. And so that's another way that we can do that. In the scientific realm, sometimes they call that intuition. In the gospel realm, we call that the light of Christ, or the light of God, basically, or the intelligence that we have. And so if that's the only way that we can put things into our brains, can any of our senses be fooled? And of course, the answer to that is yes, all of our senses can be fooled. So how can we ever really know what is the truth and what's not the truth? How do we get this word of wisdom? And what is the difference between this word of wisdom talked about in verse 17 and the word of knowledge, which is talked about in 18? Why is that differentiated with God here? And as we were pondering about this, if we only can input things into our brain using our five senses and our sense of reasoning, then what is the difference here? Well, as we know from the gospel, that as we learn line upon line and precept upon precept, the best way to learn something is through the Spirit, and the only way you're going to get information from the Spirit is by asking questions. You have to ask the Lord questions, and the Lord responds with things. So you have to study that in your mind first, and then you ask, right? This is what Moroni's challenge is all about in the Book of Mormon, is that once you've received these things, he says, I would exhort you to ask of God. Well, that means you're asking. That means a question. And one of the most important things, I believe, that you can learn in your lifetime is learning how to properly question. So we started a process of like, okay, so what kinds of questions are there? I mean, there's a bazillion different kinds of questions that you can do. I mean, different kinds of questions. But the reality of it is that you can actually break down questions into really about six. There's only 6 types of questions. And so as you look at, you have who, what, where, why, when, how, and that's kind of those are the questions that you can ask. Everything else is a derivative of those questions. And we said, so is there any way that you can kind of separate there? Is some of the questions leading to certain outcomes and other questions leading to other outcomes? And we came to the conclusion that actually there are 2 kind of separate categories of questions. One of them is questions that will give you physical data, physical information. That's the who, what, where, and when. Those are just factual. Those are the facts. This is the physical data. But how and why is different. How are they different? Because the who, what, where, and when describes things, but how and why explains things, or at least attempts to explain. So one of them is like in the scientific field is like data, and the how and the why is the interpretation of the data. And when you understand the difference between these two, you can start to understand how proper questioning makes a difference. Like, for example, I remember years ago in the Columbine high school shootings, the tragedy that happened there in Columbine, Colorado. And I remember people going, how could, if there was a God in heaven, how could a loving God allow this kind of thing to happen? Well, that's a how question. That's a wisdom question. And before you can have wisdom, you have to have knowledge. Okay, so I know that this is going to be an important point, actually, but you can't go for a wisdom understanding until you have some background knowledge. So you have to have kind of both, and I'm going to want to go into that in more detail here, because I think you're going to find this will be a huge blessing in your life if you can learn how to properly question things. So the who, what, where, and when, those give you answers to physical things, physical places, or physical time frames, or those kinds of who was involved, those kinds of things. And those are kind of the physical aspect of it. Then you also have kind of the intangible aspect, which is the how and the why. Why did this happen, or how did this? Have 2 people actually can see the same thing. Like, for example, this Columbine shooting I was just mentioning, and one of them goes, there were miracles that were there that happened that day. People who didn't end up getting shot and so forth that had miraculous things happen. But then there's these other people go, well, if there was a God, why did they let them happen? Well, they don't understand anything about who, what, where, or when God is. And when you don't have any foundation upon which to base your theory or your explanation, then you end up with all kinds of theoretical hocus pocus things, and that happens a lot actually in our lives. So I want to share with you some information on this learning process. If you want to look at it from a standpoint of the who, what, where, and when, will give you the understanding of physical things, and you have intangible things, right? And then as you go through it, so we actually ended up. I actually put together this, which is and I actually did this one first. This is the scientific. I'm just going to show you this right here. But this is a scientific progress process. So this is how you progress in the scientific realm. So you have some knowledge, some understanding, some learning. You know something about who, what, where, and when, and you ask those questions, and that using your five senses and things, and then you get basically what you end up with. That is observations and data. So you make these observations, and you understand this data, and then on the other side of the realm, you have the two questions: how and why, and that leads to kind of a hypothesis or a theory or an idea, or I wonder how this works, kind of thing, and that leads to a thought experiment to test against other hypotheses and theories. But then you also have the physical part of it, which is to test the physical attributes of what you're doing with other observations and other data, and see, does it match up. If both of those kind of match up, it seems like, in their individual realms, then you can do what I call a prediction test or observation, where the theory meets the observations. Does the data match the theory? And if it does, then if it's a good match, now you might actually have found a little nugget of truth, because the data and the theory actually match each other. But does it do it over the course of time? So you have a repeatability process. You have to go, okay, if you do this experiment and we see this happen, can we do the experiment over and over and over and over again and get the same results every time? And if there's a good repeatability, then you can actually go to the next step would be to go through this process again and again and again. And as you do so, then you'll learn new natural laws, which, if you do that, then new natural laws is the finding the truth there. And if you do the new natural laws, then you can find models which will explain a collection of laws that are interrelated with each other. And if you have several collections of laws that are interrelated and they all match up, then you can actually have what we call the universal model, which is the collection of all of the different models. But it's all based on this ability to be able to correctly predict and then have data that backs it up. Now, just like everything else, once you have gone through the experiment, you've actually tried to see if the prediction that your theory is making actually matches with what the data is saying. Some people go, you know what, I don't want to accept that. I don't want to agree with that. In which case, then they can deny that they match, and that will lead to what they call the regression process, which is essentially separating those back apart so that they either go always in the realm of theoretical information or always in the realm of just hard data, but never coming to an understanding of the truth. And so but sometimes you can come to a unifying theory where you have a whole bunch of people, and as long as they all agree that that the earth is flat or whatever kind of thing, then there's there's this unifying theory which will lead people into non-truth. Now, if you take that scientific realm and then actually apply it to the gospel and to God's spiritual progression process, let me kind of go through this just for a second with you. So if you have, for example, the knowledge and understanding increased your learning, this is becoming prudent. In the scriptures, they talk about being prudent or having knowledge. Then you ask the knowledge questions with what, where, when, and how, using your five senses. You then have a desire It talks about having a desire that leads to study and searching, and that researching and studying and things by study and also by faith. And the faith part here we'll talk about in just a second. That's the combination. By study, which is the physical data, and by faith, which is the intangible. This is the spirit, basically. And when those two things come together, it's really powerful. So then the wisdom area, on the wisdom side of this, you have learning, you have enlightenment, or you're comprehending, becoming wise. You ask the wisdom questions using reasoning and the spirit. Then you have the Spirit of God basically leads you to a belief. And this is where belief comes in, which leads to a spiritual test. You compare your previous wisdom and the gospel and revealed truths from the prophets, and that is part of faith. So you have faith that they are all true, but then you put the physical test along with the spiritual part, and you have a prediction experiment. And that's where works are combined with faith. The physical and the intangible are actually now assembled together, and if it works, then you end up with good fruit or bad fruit. Okay, so if it's good fruit, then you can take that information and say, okay, now I know this is true because it matches with what the scriptures are saying, and it matches with what my faith is saying and what the prophets have said. So everything matches up. It's good fruit. So we move forward, and we can use that now as one of the foundation parts to actually move forward in a continuing upward spiral of learning and knowledge. On the other hand, if it produces bad fruit, then you have to basically go back to the beginning and say, okay, something's wrong here. This doesn't match up. And but if you do have good fruit, then that can lead to a perfect knowledge in something. So once you have gone through the experiment and you've tested your data against, or your desire to learn and your study with your faith, and you put those two things together, it can lead to a perfect knowledge. When the Spirit witnesses and confirms to you that you are on the right path and this thing is true, then it can lead to a perfect knowledge in that thing. Not to perfect knowledge in everything, but a perfect knowledge in that thing. Just like it says in Almish, that chapter 36, the great discourse on faith, is that once you have planted the seed and the seed grows, then you know it's a good seed. There's no question about whether that seed is good or not. It says, and then you know, and your faith becomes what? Dormant. So knowledge is what God has. God doesn't have faith that he can do things. He knows he can. And that's the difference. Okay, so you have a perfect knowledge in that thing. If you continue on and you do this over and over again, and you have multiple things that you have developed this knowledge, this perfect knowledge about, that can lead to a testimony of the gospel and its principles. And if you then took those principles to the test, and you put these principles and you live them and you do them, and you realize it performs good fruit, it provides good fruit, then you actually you can have a testimony of gospel doctrines, and you can know for certainty that the gospel doctrines are true. And if you will obey and not be disobedient to those things, then ultimately you can have a testimony of God's laws, and that leads again to more and more depth of understanding and knowledge. But if you choose to be disobedient, a lot of people can know, just like the Pharisees and Sadducees, they knew the law better than most of the people did. But they didn't actually apply it. They were disobedient to the spirit of the law, and obedient only to the letter of the law. And in that particular case, then what happens is a lot of times it leads to, instead of a testimony of the gospel, a testimony of the doctrines, and then a testimony of God's laws, it can actually lead to a unifying belief, which is what exactly happened to the Pharisees and Sadducees. They basically began to just believe that whatever they say was the law, because we all believe it. And as long as we all believe it, it's a consensus thing. Then it must be true. We can only take so many steps on the Sabbath day. We can only eat so many pieces of bread or whatever. All these different restrictive things. and they know all those things by heart, but then they miss the overall importance of really worshiping on the Sabbath. So the last part of this thing here is the learning process in Scripture. This is something I put together. In fact, the last update was on November 10th of 2002. So this has been a long time, but it's called the learning process in Scripture. And so what we did on this particular thing is I took the knowledge questions and wisdom questions, find those in the Scriptures, and then see how they interrelate with this. If you have red and blue, and you put the two of them together, it makes what color? Purple, right? So when you have the red, which is knowledge scriptures, and you have blue, which are wisdom scriptures. And by the way, there's other words that are used in the scriptures. For example, knowledge describes. It answers the questions of what, where, when, and who by using the five senses. And some of the scripts, the wording that is used in lieu of the word knowledge is understanding, prudent, physical works and study. And then the questions what, where, when, and who are also listed out in this. I'm going to try to make this available for you so you can just download this off of the website when we get this out here. Wisdom, in that case, it's called, in the scriptures it talks about being wise or comprehending. It talks about faith and belief, or light, to quicken your understanding, or the spirit, intangible. And then so each one of these I have an X wherever, if it's a knowledge thing or a wisdom thing, or if it has a progression thing. And you can actually look through it. This is in the Book of Mormon here. And then here is the Doctrine and Covenants, and the wisdom and knowledge in the Doctrine and Covenants, and that includes the Pearl of Great Price. And you have the New Testament ones here, and then you also have the Old Testament ones there. So there's a lot of information here. I think you'll see that throughout the scriptures that the Lord is very consistent with the proper usage of these things. And so we go back to our scriptures here for a moment. So to some is given the Spirit of by the Spirit of God, the word of wisdom, and another is given the word of knowledge. Again, the two things there, I believe, are a lot of people have said, well, wisdom is essentially knowledge applied. But actually, if you go back to the questions, you'll realize that it really makes a big difference as to what question that you're asking if you're going to get this gift. And it says that the reason for this gift is that all may be taught to be wise and to have knowledge. It's important to be grounded, folks, in both. You have some people who are saying, you know what, I just believe everything that science says, because science is all about the facts. They don't realize that scientists are people too, and they have their own biases and opinions just like everyone else. So just because you're a scientist does not necessarily mean that you're going to have all the truth. There's other people who basically say, you know what, I don't really care what science says. I just believe this because I want to believe this particular thing, which can lead you off into all kinds of strange areas. So it's easy to get too much on one side or the other, but if you can have a balance in your life where you have some areas where you can explain some things, but maybe you can't explain everything, and other areas that are founded and rooted in something that's tangible and real. I'm reminded in the dream of Lehi's vision of the Tree of Life, where he basically sees this great and spacious building, and in the great and spacious building, there's millions of, it just says multitudes of people, right? And they're all laughing and mocking at those people who had made it along the iron rod and basically made it to the tree and had partaken of the fruit. And these other people in this huge building were just laughing and mocking about it. But what was the foundation upon which that building was built? If you remember right, it says it was standing, as it were, in the air, meaning it has no foundation in reality. It's like a hologram. It's not really, it's not real. But yet all these people believed in their heart of hearts that because of the sheer magnitude and size of this apparition, that they somehow were more stable than the people who had their feet actually on the ground and actually were partaking of the fruit. And so I just find that's really a fascinating thing to just kind of to think about there. It says verse 19. And again, to some is given to have faith to be healed. So it takes some people, it takes a lot of faith to be healed. And I know some people like that. In fact, there's some people in this room like that. And to others it is given to have faith to heal. So sometimes it takes both the giver and the receiver. The receiver has to have the faith to be healed, but the person giving the gift, giving the blessing, also needs to have faith. I find it fascinating. I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine down in Arizona. He said, what was one of the first things that Christ always did when he met people? He healed them. He physically healed them. I mean, how many of Christ's miracles were about physical healings? Whether it was the guys who had the leprosy or whatever, or even healed from death, like in the daughter and so forth. But when he came to the Nephites, one of the first things he did is he gathered to bring me all your lame and your sick and your afflicted people. And before I get into actually teaching you, I'm going to heal you physically so that you can have the ability to concentrate on the things that he was about to tell him. So it works in both directions here. And again, to some is given the working of miracles, verse 21, and to others is given to prophesy. So some people actually work the miracles, and other people prophesy about those miracles or about other things that are going to happen. To others, it's the discerning of spirits, being able to know what type of spirits it is that are around you or around other people, or who are you listening to? What kind of a spirit is that? Where does it lead you? And again, it is given to some to speak with tongues. I went on my mission to Italy, so I was speaking in tongues, so to speak, but I also spent several weeks, about 2 months actually, in the MTC learning Italian. So you had to get the physical part of it, and there's the physical preparation to be able to speak in tongues. Now there's sometimes when people just can have that just happen. I think that's a lot more rare than speaking in tongues, basically where you are having to learn it first. I mean, Joseph Smith, one of the greatest prophets in the history of mankind, and he had to go and study Hebrew. It didn't just fall into his brain. That's not how it works. You have to put some effort into things in order to get something back out. Let me see here. Verse 26, all these gifts come from God for the benefit of the children of God. That is the whole purpose, folks, is to benefit the other children of God that are on this earth that we are sojourning with together. So I'm hoping that this little discussion here is going to help inspire you not to get the gifts because it's something that can bless you in your life, but to be always worthy to receive the gifts that God wants to give you at the time and for the purpose that he will prescribe. It's not about you getting the gift. It's about you having capability to obtain the gift at the right time and place to bless the lives of other people. Let's see. Verse 29, that unto some it may be given to have all those gifts, that there may be a head, in order that every member may be profited thereby. We were just having a discussion here before we recorded this podcast about how we had other prophets, how they had different gifts, but Joseph Smith was given all of the gifts, which tells you something right there. If the old prophets didn't have all the gifts, then probably they weren't supposed to have all the gifts. But there's some people like Joseph Smith who have all the gifts, and that is something that is because of their mission in this life. So if you don't have the gift of speaking in tongues, don't worry about it. It will happen. If the Lord needs you to go on a mission or to be a mission president and you need to learn another language, then study it and learn it and ask for the gift. And when you need it, the gift will come. Let's move on to section 47 for just a minute. This is John Whitmer, or to John Whitmer, and he's told to keep a regular history. Verse 3 says, "Again I say unto you that it shall be appointed unto him to keep the church record and history continually. For Oliver Cowdery I have appointed to another office." It sounds like Oliver Cowdery was kind of the first choice, but then John Whitner was asked here by the Lord to keep a record and a history. So critical is history. We have talked about this in several other podcasts last year, and talking about how if you think about how important it was for Lehi to send his sons back and put them in physical danger for what? To get the history that was recorded on the brass plates that Laban had, and the Lord said, you have to have this because it's better for one man to die, i.e. Laban, than for an entire nation to dwindle in unbelief because they don't know the history. History is so critical, and we've got to get the history right, which is part of the reason why we here with the Firm Foundation, and my personal feeling is that we have to get the history right. Things like the seer stone and the hat translation theory, coming from people who were apostates, and ignoring those who are actually involved with it, like Oliver Cowdery and Joseph Smith, and their own words, and even the words of the Lord are being ignored in some cases, where he constantly, throughout the Doctrine and Covenants and all the church history that was written early on, that the translation was done using the instrument that God had prepared several thousand years in advance, the Urim and Thummim, and there's not one single solitary instance of any use of a seer stone in any of those accounts, except for the ones that came from apostates. So why are we using apostate history to justify what we're talking about here? So we've beat that horse pretty good before, so we're not going to go there any further here today. So and then to finish it up here, it also here in section 48, it actually talks about giving up some land, or buying land and imparting that to the Eastern brethren, or people who are coming from the East, and so they can have some place to build homes and things. This is verse 3. "For it must needs be necessary that they have places to live for the present time." I'll never forget Brigham Young made a statement where he said, talking about missionary work, he says, "It makes no sense to teach a person about the gospel if they're starving to death. They're not going to be really paying attention if they're in the process of starving to death." So the first thing you got to do is take care of the physical needs and the physical aspects of their life, and then you can move on to some of the other things like the gospel and things like that. So what I'm saying is that there's a hierarchy of needs, and one of our first hierarchy of needs is breath, right? So you notice within about 1 or 2 minutes, if you're not getting air, so that's the fastest way to go unconscious is not having air. You can also go unconscious because of bleeding out or something like that too. But the point basically is that there's a hierarchy of needs. We need to breathe. We need to have our hearts keep pumping. We need to have food. We need to have shelter and some of those kind of things. But once we get past those basics of life, then we can move on to other things. And I think of people like Beethoven and Mozart and other people where they had all the basics taken care of to the point where they could actually strive for even more grand and amazing things, and creating this incredible music and things, and all the inventions that have blessed mankind. But you got to get the basics covered first. So make sure as you go through your process of learning here, in your learning process, that you cover your basics first, and then make sure that you keep moving forward, because that's when you can really bless people's lives. If you want to give people good gifts, then you have to be, again, ready to receive the gift, which means you have to have a certain level of purity, a certain level of honor, a certain level of truth in your life. And then after you have gotten that in your life, then you are ready to give to other people and help them to understand. So that's my hope and my goal here is to help you to be able to better your own lives. And as you do so, I know that the Lord will bless you, and you'll be given more further light and knowledge. Is that interesting? Light and knowledge. Light is the intangible. Knowledge is the tangible. You put the physical and the spiritual together, and you have a fullness of joy. So I hope that you will take the things that you're learning and then apply it, and your faith, and then come to the ultimate realization, which is essentially this: to have a perfect knowledge in many things, have a testimony of the gospel and its principles, then work that up to a testimony of the gospel and its doctrines, and then you move into a testimony of God's laws. And as you do that and you go through this process, I hope that you will be blessed in doing so, and that as you do so, then your goal should be to bless the lives of other people. Thank you so much for taking this time with me, and I hope that this has been something that will be beneficial for you. And we will look forward to next week, and I'm trying to get some more guests and so forth lined up here. But thank you again for joining us at the Come Follow Me program here, and we'll see you next week. Thanks so much.